Hi, welcome to episode 58 of Fresh Air at 5, the podcast. On this episode, I dig into some ed tech things, I dig into some assessment practice, and I dig into some teacher stories to hear from teachers and educators and their journeys. The title of this is going to be, Do You See Yourself in There? And that's going to be the title because I think it was on the Wednesday episode of a segment that I listened to. I heard from Matt Woods and Brittany Wolf as they talk about seeing themselves represented in media and in literature and how important that is. All right, as I'm walking along here, two deer just walked across my road, and it's cool to see the wildlife in my neighborhood. Thankfully, it's not spring at this point, and they're going to come to my yard and eat my wife's flowers. So, with that note, hey, here we go. Episode 58, Fresh Air at 5, the podcast.
I'm Lance Key, co-host of Get Inspired and Innovate, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows on the network are individually owned and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Welcome to Fresh Air at 5, the podcast. I'm your host, Brian Carpenter. Fresh Air at 5 is my regular attempt to exercise by walking about my neighborhood to take in podcast content, then reflect in an unedited video, which I finally post to my Twitter channel. This podcast will be a regular collection of the audio from these selfie videos. You can follow me on Twitter at FreshAirAtFive or check out my website, briancarpenter.com, for other content I have created and collected.
Hey PLN, January 31st, 2022. Welcome to the end and the last day of January. It's the eve of February. Looking at it like that, it's kind of special that we're rolling into February. I don't know how you feel about that being special, but I think it's pretty special because we're making progress through this thing of the school year, and students are learning, and there's evidence of that has been shared through report cards in our secondaries, and our middle schools and elementaries are gaining ground and doing amazing things. So this morning, as I'm out walking for Fresh Air at 5, and this is episode 58, can't believe it, 58 episodes, I listened to a friend of mine, Brad Hughes, on the the Good News Brad News show, episode 28. Congratulations, Brad. Nice to hear your voice again. And you had a heartwarming conversation with an educator named Dennis Matthew out of Oklahoma. And people, we all have that turning point in our lives where we turn towards education. Not everybody, but those of us that are educators. And it may have been when you were in university, it may have been when you were in high school, but whatever it is, that moment when you say yes to education, that I'm going to make a difference in young people's lives, is quite amazing. Dennis shares a story. Dennis is a speech pathologist, and I don't exactly understand what that means, except he works with kids and makes a difference for them where they struggle. And so, Dennis, thank you for your words. Thank you for your message of hope and making a difference in kids' lives. So, yes, take a listen to episode 28 of the Good News Brad News podcast. Talk to you soon. One more thing for January 31, 2022. Good morning, and I don't know what time it is there, Trav Golter, but it must be a lot earlier where you are than where I am right now, and you're enjoying the summer, and it's still winter here where I am. All right, so I just listened to episode 43 of Just a Teacher podcast as Trav talks with cyber security specialist Trent Ray out of Melbourne, and how they talk about cyber safety for kids and in schools, and some of the concerns and issues that we have with using technology, and how do we keep our kids safe in this space. And listening to this there's some things that I got to think about as I do my work that I do. Yes, parents have consented to photos of students being used for classwork and posted on the screen in the school. But you know what? I got to remember that maybe the student doesn't want their picture to be on the screen. And I need to do a better job of that. Because just because consent has been given doesn't mean that the student consents. They might be young, but it still doesn't matter. They still have a choice. So that's the practice as a teacher that we need to consider so that we are caring for the relationships with our students and that they trust us. Also, how and what apps are we using? What apps are the students using? What do we know about Discord and Twitch for communication? I have very little understanding of these things. My own kids in my own home are using these platforms, and I go, friends of theirs and adults in their lives are using these platforms, and I go, that must be okay. But do I understand? Nope, don't understand. So I got to do some learning. Thank you, Trent, for your message and your word of hope in our technology-filled world that we can work with kids and make a difference for them. All right, talk to you later. The last thing that I'm going to have to say for January 31, 2022, I just listened to Mindset Monday with George Koros. Thanks, George. Thank you, George. Season 2, Episode 5, to tear down or to lift up and to build up. And you know what, George? It's so important that we are mindful of our words. Our words matter a lot in how we say things. We can passively aggressive say something to someone, or we can, I can't remember what the term is, where you make a comment which is like just maybe a flat statement, but it's actually directed really sharply at somebody to get to them and to affect them. And we do a good job of tearing each other down. It's so easy to do. Get on Facebook for 5 minutes, and depending on who your friends are, are they your friends or are they not? And we can see how that can happen so very quickly. I appreciate, George, your vulnerability. I talked about it on Teachers on Fire episode 215 as Tim Cavey and Tim Stevenson and I sat around last Tuesday morning over coffee, and you are that one person that I'm going to look up to for your vulnerability and your how you share your life with us, and so important. I appreciate that so much, and thanks for sharing your health journey with us. I don't know if anybody said that, but it makes a difference to hear somebody that is successful and making a difference to still be vulnerable, because we all have our vulnerabilities, and we are all in this thing together, and none of us is better than the other. We all just make it in different ways on our own time scale. All right, take a listen to Mindset Monday, Season 2, Episode 5 on the Innovators Mindset Podcast. All right, bye. Hey, PLN, happy February 1, 2022. Happy Lunar New Year and the beginning of the Year of the Tiger. So, that's happened today, the new moon and the beginning of the new Lunar New Year. So I talked about that with my students this morning, trying to be more culturally responsive to our environment and things that are going on around us. And we had a great discussion about that. And it was fun to dig into an understanding of this calendar that I am not super familiar with. So I'm learning, and my students are learning. So that's a lot of fun to do and have those conversations. All right, this afternoon, I listened to a new to me podcast, but not from a guy that's new to me. It's Kyle Anderson and his co-host Ben. Ben, I don't know your last name. I'm sorry, I didn't look that up a moment ago as I started listening, but it's the Beer EDU podcast. Beer EDU podcast. And these guys, Kyle and Ben, sit down over a pint of beer and they talk about beer and learn about beer. And then they talk about education, and they talk about the good stuff that's going on in education. And it was great to hear them have a conversation on episode 119 of the Beer EDU podcast with Phil Cutler, who you can find on Instagram and Twitter and places. And he is the founder of a company called paper.co, and paper.co is about educational equality or equity, and about providing learning resources and actually tutoring, not learning resources, but tutoring support for students in districts from around the world, and supporting students by having tutors available to support students. So yeah, it was great to hear your story, Phil. Great to hear how you are reaching many and different places. I will pass this along. I don't know if my district would be interested in it, but it's a great opportunity, I think, to provide a little bit more than what we can in the classroom to support students synchronously and asynchronously. All right, that's it. Have a great day, guys. Nice to connect. I just signed up for Untapped. Haven't done so yet, and I will share my username in a bit. Okay, peace. Bye. I just signed into Untapped app and set up my account and everything like that. So my username, gents, is Brian Carr, BRYONCAR. That's capital B, RYON, capital CAR. Just like my Twitter handle. All right, Carpenter out. Bye. The last thing for February 1, 2022 on Fresh Air at 5, I just took in the EduMagic podcast, episode 164, as Dr. Sam brings us an episode where she reviews how to prep and study for quizzes in your semester. It's 5 tips for students as they take quizzes. And Dr. Sam, sounds like you are speaking to your student teacher group and how they can prepare for learning. And you know what? As a classroom teacher, these are such great things to be reminded of as I help my students prepare for their quiz learning or quiz taking, and remind them that the mark on the quiz is just the mark on the quiz, and they might have a bad day, but does that reflect their ability to learn? Because it's not about the mark, it's about the learning. And so that's an important thing, and trying to convey to students that marks aren't everything. They look nice, but it's about the learning. You can have high marks and not have learned anything because you're able to write the test really well, but not apply it. All right, thank you, Dr. Sam, and to your students, good luck as you take those quizzes. All right, Carpenter out. Bye-bye. Hey PLN, February 2nd, 2022, and I am out for Fresh Air at 5 this morning. It is chilly. It's like 0 Celsius. Okay, for most of Canada, that's not cold, but here it is, and we are expecting some snow today, so we could have snow tomorrow morning. So we'll see how it goes, and prep for that. They've been out salting the roads, prepping for snowfall. So that's been, yeah. You know, it's February, the weather should be chilling out and getting a little calmer than it has been. So we're hoping that it's not a big deal coming. All right, this morning I listened to episode 104 of Got Tech, the podcast. And Eric and Nick, first off the top, I want to say congratulations for being now part of the Teach Better podcast network. And my paths crossed with Jeff Gargas many years ago. And Jeff and I have been in touch. Haven't done much lately with Jeff, but he has made a difference in my life. Him and Ray Hewart and the team there over the years of me listening to podcasts, and I used to listen to them all the time. My friend Tim Stevenson of Science 360 is a member of the Teach Better podcast network, so shout out to Tim Stevenson. And Eric and Nick, you guys have probably heard me talk about him here on my own podcast, Fresh Air at 5. So yes, that's a great announcement. Fantastic, and congratulations to you guys on now a bigger platform for getting your message out there that makes a difference for us. All right, episode 104 is about 17 best kept secrets in Google Workspace for education. And I honestly have heard and used probably about half of these regularly, but there's some that are a little more obscure, and the extensions list that you guys gave is a really good list. I'm going to go check that out. But the one that was really curious to me was in Google Sheets, Control-Enter to make a line break in a cell. Fantastic. Awesome. That is so good. So thanks, guys. Have a fabulous day, and stay warm, stay safe. Bye. The last thing for Wednesday, February 2, 2022. I just listened to episode 48 of Science 360 as Tim Stevenson has on a guest, DJ Moon, who is a grade 12 student at his school. And DJ Moon is an expert in crypto, Bitcoin, DAO. Oh my, that's the name of this episode. And DJ talks about how the impact of school and what we do learn in school, and also what he has observed that we don't learn in school. DJ has been a member of a knowledge learning and a thinking group. I can't remember exactly what it's called. Take a listen to the episode. But DJ spends time each week with a mentor and someone, an organization that teaches him to think. Thinking is the most powerful thing that we can do for our students. Having them just regurgitate memorized facts and things like that, that is not what education should be about. My whole master's program taught me one thing, and that was how to think and problem solve when I run into a situation that I don't know. Yeah, sure, it was about organometallic synthetic chemistry, where I made these fancy molecules that didn't do what we were hoping that they would do. But the whole point is that I had to work on thinking and learning how to do that. That thinking process has served me very well. Am I a strong and able thinker? Sometimes, most times, but sometimes, you know what? I could do a bit more thinking time than I've got. Tim, thanks for sharing DJ's story with us and having him be on to talk about Bitcoin and DAO and all these things that I don't understand. So I'm going to have to go back and probably listen to this again. But now that I know that DJ's an expert in this, I could follow DJ and learn from him, not being, one of these older experts in the world, but he is a young man that has passion and desire to learn. So congratulations, DJ, on your ascension to this space, and happy grad this year. Okay, take care. Bye-bye. Hey, PLN, it is Thursday, February 3, 2022, and this morning for FreshAirAtFive, I'm going to report that we didn't get as much snow as they said we were going to get, which is great, and I'm thankful for. Don't have to wear my micro spikes this morning, and out for FreshAirAtFive, getting some fresh air, and stepping into Thursday, which is my secondary teaching day, where I teach media design to grade 9s to 12s, and working on the yearbook project. So yes, that's what's going to happen today. That's going on today. And at the outset, I was encouraged to listen to
Episode 66
of Overthrowing Education with Batsheva Frankel. And Batsheva, it was great to hear your voice again. And you had on guest Matt Woods. And Matt has a podcast. He's a leader in his district and does all manner of things to raise the level of education in his space. And he's even written a small children's book series called Who You Can Be, or something very much like that, and is publishing a second edition of these books with Codebreaker coming up soon. So that's fantastic, Matt. Appreciate the work that I heard you talking about. The title of this is Being a Leader, or Leadership in Burned Out Times. And we are tired these days. We are pretty spent because we don't know when the big C is going to end. That'd be COVID. We don't know when it's going to stop, when restrictions and the constant need to pivot and change and respond to, students are here, so they're not, how to meet their needs, how to provide content for them, how to build relationships with them in and out of the building so that we can grow them as young people. And I appreciated how you talked, Matthew, about leadership, and not that, leadership has to do with being a teacher and then going straight to being a principal or vice principal, but it has to do with how you were a leader in your building and where you fit in. So find where you are a leader and do a good job there, because it makes a difference for lots. All right, have a good day, buddy. Bye-bye. One more thing for February 3, 2022, continuing my thoughts on episode 68 of Overthrowing Education, and with Matthew Woods and Batsheva Frankel. And as they were talking about leadership, I ended the last one with a quick statement about how we can be leaders in our building without being the administrators in our building. And that is something that, we need to figure out. We aren't just teachers and then there's the principal. It's not like that. There are leaders in different spaces. There are department head leaders, for example. There are, division leaders. There are, you as a teacher in your classroom are a leader of a group of students. And, we need to see ourselves as leaders, that we are making a difference, because if we don't call ourselves leaders, then we won't be leading. And so the names that we give ourselves are so very important. And I believe that I am a leader in my space. I am a department head at my school, and I, lead the charge right now on the yearbook and on other projects like our newsletter. And with my students, those are student projects that I lead, and we provide, do the desktop publishing for. And, even out there on Twitter land, here's my podcast, Fresh Air at 5. I'm being a leader here by providing some content and sharing my thoughts about, hey, you should maybe take a listen to this podcast. There are a number of you out there that do listen, and I encourage you to pass along my podcast to others, because I listen to a lot of variety of podcasts, give my thoughts on them, and then it might be good for that person to hear me say something that says, hey, I should listen to that podcast. So I encourage you to take a listen to Overthrowing Education, episode 68, with Matthew Woods, as they're talking about leadership. All right, what kind of leader are you in your building? You don't have to be the boss, but you got to be a leader. Okay, bye. One more thing for February 3, 2022. I just listened to a very touching episode of Aspire to Lead, and I'm not saying Josh's other episodes aren't touching, but this is the one I just listened to now, and it's titled One Tick at a Time with Brittany Wolf. And Brittany Wolf was a young lady that discovered she had Tourette syndrome as a young girl, and is still living with Tourette syndrome. And Brittany shares her story with us, which is a major significant part of us learning about how we can care and be with people that have Tourette syndrome and understanding them. And Brittany, thank you so much for your vulnerability and sharing with us here, so that I, right now, can hear this and learn a little bit more today, because I know more now than I did before I listened. And that is so important, that we have awareness. We have awareness, because if we don't have awareness, we can't even go and learn and start to figure out more, so that we can help those, and even just understand how we can't help those that have different things that are going on in our classroom. As a teacher, I get a group of students, and my hope is that I can understand them all. And if I don't understand them all, then I need to do something about that to understand them. Brittany, you talked about representation and how you saw that one movie where there was Edward Norton. I can't remember the movie, something Brooklyn, and how you saw yourself represented in a movie in a way that was not in the blunt of a joke, or, it was not, you weren't the comedian or something like that, or Edward Norton was just a normal person, and that you cried. My eyes welled up when you said that, because representation and seeing ourselves in media and places is so very important. I just listened to Overthrowing Education with Batsheva Frankel, and Matt Woods talked about the same thing, about seeing himself represented in action figures when he was a little boy and wasn't there. And so it's so important. How do we represent ourselves, and how do we see ourselves? Thanks all. Talk to you soon. Bye. One more thing for February 3, 2022, out for delivering papers this afternoon, getting some more steps in. Fresh air at just before 5 p.m. I enjoyed and learned and listened to episode 126 of the Burned In Teacher podcast with Amber Harper. And Amber had on guests Molly and Alexis, and the three of them are Instagram BFFs, and they've developed that relationship over the past little while here, and use Marco Polo. Actually, they're on Marco Polo, so that's how they have their voice conversations with each other, and they have spent a lot of time supporting and growing each other through social media. The episode title is How to Get Rid of Negativity in Teachergram and Say No to Negativity. And it's really important how we do that, because social media can be so very toxic, and I believe that it can be super toxic in where we spend our time and how we convey messages. And it's not about toxic positivity, it's about being real and taking care of yourself. People don't need to be like exuberantly positive all the time, but it's how and who we take and get that confidence and that message from, whether or not we are, getting negative information or whether we are making a difference and taking in positive. So you can follow me. I think I put out positive stuff. Thank you, Amber and Alexis and Molly, for your share. And if you're feeling the crunch of all this on Instagram and Teachergram, as we call it, or EduTwitter, take a listen to this episode. You can gain something from that. All right, thanks so much. Talk to you soon. And the last thing for February 3, 2022, I have just listened to a New to Me podcast. It's part of the work that I'm doing on working through the Educational Podcast Network and the podcasts that I haven't listened to. And I cannot believe it that I haven't subscribed and listened to Get Inspired and Innovate with Stephanie Howell and Lance Key. And so Lance and Stephanie, you're now in my podcast library, and I am working on now listening. So it was fantastic. I listened to episode 95, I believe, today, as you had on guest Kim Vogue, and she's out of Southern California, and you talked about bringing back the art and craft of teaching and the things that can happen that people can do to continue to teach as we get back into face-to-face and away from the remote like we have done in the past. So yeah, you know what? Glad to have you in my podcast queue. Welcome to Fresh Air at 5, and you're on the bumper today for this week for episode 58 of Fresh Air at 5, the podcast. I've got to go and get the Edger protocols. I've heard about them for years, and I got to go get the book and do my work to understand how I can leverage these protocols in my own classroom. All right, I teach secondary and middle school, so I have to look at them, but because there's probably work that I can use to do in my own classroom. All right, thank you, Stephanie, for your work and being present on Twitter that I've been following. And Lance, I'm going to follow you now, and Kim Vogue, I'm going to follow you now. So yes, happy day, happy Thursday, and we will see you guys tomorrow morning. Okay, bye. Hey PLN, it is February 4, 2022, out for Fresh Air at 5 this morning, and it's a beautiful morning. The fog was thick in the air for a while, and it's cleared up now, and I'm feeling refreshed. I didn't want to get out of bed this morning. Honestly, I wanted to stay in bed, but I had to force myself to get out of bed. I'm so glad I did, because I got to listen to episode 68 of the Tom Schimmer Show. And Tom, thank you for your inspiration this morning. Thank you for bringing us the first Don't At Me part about words, how we use words ruins words. And you talked about two words in this section, and one was toxicity or toxic, and the other was phobia. I agree that, you know what, we slap the same label on a low level all the way to a high level situation, something that is super mild and you got under my nerves for a moment, that you're toxic, as opposed to a really bad situation that we do label as toxic. So thank you for that. I appreciate you having us think about where do we use our words so that we're being mindful about what we say. And so trying to get our students to do the same thing is really important. All right, you talked to Susan Brookhart in the middle section about assessment practices and rubrics. And Tom, I am still new to this rubric thing. I've been using rubrics, but they've been ineffective because I've counted things. And I need to get away from counting and looking at what am I trying to assess by giving students, putting a rubric on a task that may or may not warrant that rubric. And so being mindful about that. So thank you, Susan and Tom, for sharing your words about this. And then at the very end, trust the process. Good morning. Trust the process as you work through an assessment change in your own teaching space or in your school, and as leaders, that we need to trust the process and that it will happen. Maybe not right now, but it will take place. Me listening to this podcast is transforming my practice. Thank you, Tom. Have a great day. Bye. The last thing for Friday, February 4th, 2022. If you're listening to this in the podcast, thank you so much for sticking with it and getting to this spot this week. If you haven't listened to my podcast, but you've listened here and there to my dailies, I would encourage you to go and subscribe to my podcast so you can catch up and keep up with what I'm learning about as the weeks go on. I talk about ed tech, some that are in here as I listen to ed tech podcasts. I talk about teacher stories as I listen to some teacher story things. And then as of today, and I listen to Tom Schimmer and I learn about assessment, and I talk about my growth and the little bits of things that I'm learning about assessment practices. So there's a lot that I share, and I'm hoping that you listen to the whole podcast as opposed to the dailies here on Twitter. Maybe I should stop those dailies on Twitter. Put your hand up if you want me to stop those. Actually, I'm just kidding, because I don't want to stop those, because that'll make compiling my recording at the end of the week very much different and a very different engagement. So I'm not going to do that. All right. It's been a really full week, but it's been a fantastic week. I've watched my students grow in their learning, and it's fun to see over time. So as Tom Schimmer closes out his episode of 68 of the Tom Schimmer Show, trust the process. So I am trusting my process, and it might not be perfect, but it is a process nonetheless. Happy Friday. We'll see you guys next week. Okay, bye.
As my one word for 2021 is appreciate, I appreciate you giving me a listen as I've created this podcast experience for you. It's a unique Blinkist or Coles Notes version of the content I take in, like a highlight reel, so that you can hopefully find other interesting podcasts you may not have considered before. I've recorded the specific podcast episodes in the show notes for your learning convenience. Please subscribe so you don't miss any of my upcoming episodes. And if you enjoy this podcast and its format, share it with someone else. Tweet about your experience or give it a review on Apple Podcast or wherever you listen to podcasts. Fresh Air at 5 can also be found on Voice Ed Radio. Your voice is right here, and on the Education Podcast Network, podcasts for educators, podcasts by educators. I hope you have a fantastic day and get some fresh air before the day is out, and take care of yourself, because you're worth it.